Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world. It's once again time for the WADcast episode number 161. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me, as always, by the guy that does stuff sometimes, but mostly not, Brandon.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Good to be back here. But yeah, you and I had an interesting conversation this week about IP and everything else, and I don't know
it was
if
not
you.
interesting at all.
No, I thought it was fine. Fine. Then
messing
I had
with
an
you.
interesting conversation that you just listened to. But no, it's we were talking about IP. For those of you who are not aware of what IP is, it stands for intellectual property. So you have people that create things like you have Winnie the Pooh, right? Is an intellectual property. Peter Pan. It's not relegated strictly to Disney because it is. These are things you can actually. These are in public domain. But then you have things such as if you're a comic book nerd, you have like X-Men, you have Spider-Man, things like that. I just saw Madam Web.
Why?
Because I was curious. I want to see what it would do as far as like the whole Ben Parker, if he even acknowledges Peter Parker in any single way, shape, or form. It does kind of, but not really. It wasn't good. It was not good at all. But Sony is infamous for what they do with IP. It's a great example. What they did with Morbius, what they did with Venom, what they're doing with what they did with Madam Web now, what they're going to do with Kraven the Hunter. They're making these movies which are largely Spider-Man villains and just telling stories without a Spider-Man in existence for the most part. So it's just like, why? Right? But you have other forms of IP, Transformers, you have The Color Purple, you have novels, you have different things. But you and I were talking in our conversation about the relationships that studios have. Not just with IP, but also with storytelling as a whole. And how we end up with things like director's cuts for movies, things like that, which I know we've briefly spoken about this on previous episodes before. But I don't think we ever really dove into why these director's cuts happen, or even like how the mishandling of any person's intellectual property can actually really damage the fan base for said IP. Or it can, good handling of it can actually encourage more fan bases. I have a great example of that, which is Deadpool. What they did with Deadpool and X-Men, what's it? X-Men Origins, I think, right?
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah. So they had Deadpool was, kind of like the big bad Nexus Striker. He's like the lackey for Stryker. And they did what they should not have done, which is take a character known as the Merc with the Mouth and remove his mouth.
Yeah.
Because reasons. But then Ryan Reynolds was so passionate about it that he came and he spent years developing the Deadpool movie we got in. I think it was 2016. I think is when the first one came out.
God, has it been that long?
It's been a while, buddy. Yeah, it's been quite some time now. But with what he came out with, and it wasn't just that; it was test footage that was made for Deadpool, which Ryan Reynolds has been open about. Like eventually down the line, he was open about leaking this. Excuse me. And with that test footage, that got people interested in talking about they got this buzz going about a live action Deadpool movie because of how well it worked, which then gave us the Deadpool movie in 2016. Then gave us Deadpool 2, then gave us Once Upon a Deadpool. And then with the newest Deadpool trailer that was released last Sunday, I just needed to see 5 seconds of this trailer, and I was like, I'm in. I'm down. Don't show me anything else. Then you get like that tease of Wolverine at the very end of the trailer. But Deadpool's hand is like, oh, don't just stand there, like, give me a hand. And you see like the claws coming out, and he's like, no, I'm good. But I mean, it's just like it's very much something that like has created more of a fan base for those who have not been very familiar with Deadpool. And let's face it, there are many people that did not really know much about Deadpool. Case in point, parents taking their kids out to go see Deadpool, thinking it was like just another superhero movie, to find out that this is not exactly like a superhero kind of person. But yeah.
Yeah, especially the way he celebrates International Women's Day.
Oh yeah. Still my favorite part of the new trailer. Pegging is nothing new to me, but it is to Disney.
You got to nail the delivery.
Oh my god.
Where he says, but it is to Disney. Looking at the camera.
Yeah. That's so stupid. But I mean, I'm looking forward to it. But
Bring me MCU Jesus.
But it's like that's my point though. It's like it doesn't take much, and it has created a buzz. People were like anxiously awaiting for this, and there's so many spoilers. No, I don't want to say spoilers, but there's so many leaks from like behind the scenes pictures that have come out over the last couple of months now, and people are just like going crazy over it, and that's because an IP was respected. And fighting with Disney over the whole thing when Disney took over, like, when they acquired Fox Studios, and now they hold any IP that Fox had for superheroes, which means all of X-Men properties. You have a studio that now is known for kind of not really respecting, source materials for things.
Which studio?
Disney.
Disney not respecting source material?
I know, right? It's a shocker. And let's face it, Fox did the same damn thing. So it's just Ryan Reynolds being able to get what he wanted to get done with this is pretty awesome. And if they're leaving him alone and allowing this to be like an R-rated movie,
and the trailer itself proved it's
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm just saying, it's like as long as they like cut their grubby mitts off of it, and they didn't pull a Kathleen Kennedy with it, I'm excited for it.
Different branch.
Oh, I know. It's a different branch altogether. I'm just saying, it's just like, but that goes back to what I was saying with like with IP. You have Kathleen Kennedy with Star Wars. John Favreau almost walked away from The Mandalorian because of Kathleen Kennedy overstepping her boundaries, and he's even discussed that, talking about how like he didn't like throw her name under the bus, I don't think, but we know who runs Star Wars. We know who's in charge of Lucasfilm. So when you have someone that's pretty much like cracking down and like giving ideas and saying like, this is what I want to see and everything else, it just reminds me of Kevin Smith talking about, was it John Peters, right?
Yeah, John Peters.
John Peters. It reminds me of him talking about John Peters with Superman. You can make Superman, but he cannot fly and he can't wear tights, and he's got to fight a giant spider at the end of the movie.
No tights, no flights. And Kevin Smith was like, it's a weird rule, but I get to write Superman. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, technically Superman in his earliest issues wasn't flying so much as he was leaping.
Right. That was something that was retcon later on.
Yeah. So Superman just used to jump really high. That was about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, it's a great example of taking an IP and being like, you know what, I can make this better. And it's just, I mean, like what's an example you can think of? Like, like just an IP that you think, shit, like this is, now you ever see something like where you're like, this could have been so good. Like the story was there. But what happened?
Countless times.
All right, what's one that sticks in your mind? Comic book, not comic book, whatever.
So let me see if I'm getting your question right. You want me to come up with an example of an adaptation where the original source material was such a promising piece that uh, a studio or a director or somebody just decided they could do it better in a translation.
Yep. Yeah.
Off the top of my head, my mind immediately goes to The Running Man.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the story.
I am.
It's in the film. It's this Arnold Schwarzenegger action fest when the novel written by Stephen King as Richard Bachman, I think it was very much a dystopian hellscape where you had to buy your oxygen.
Yep.
And this was the whole idea of the games was to give the most desperate of people the necessities to kind of it's sort of like you sell your soul or sell your body
Yeah.
so your family could survive.
Yep.
Because you weren't going to walk away. And it was big. It was basically a sport where the hunters hunted you. And one of spoilers for the novel, The Running Man.
It's okay. It's a couple decades old. I don't think it's going to be much of a spoiler for people.
It's just the ending has always stuck with me, where you got the guy. He's on a plane. They're flying him back. You're going to give him what he wants because he survived. Da, 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 da. But over the course of the journey, then the scale of his mission grew as he learned more and more about people, trying to hide in the country, learning about the people out there and how the games are destroying essentially the world.
Yeah.
So as they're flying him back, he hijacks the plane, gets shot in the gut. And as he's like literally holding his intestines in, but they keep falling out. At one point, one of them, a piece gets snagged on one of the seats in the cabin of the plane, trips him up for a second, but he ends that story by flying the plane into the building of the games, where the games originate.
Yeah.
And just taking everybody out. And for some reason, instead of doing this really graphic display, this gritty everyman story where this guy is just trying to help his kids survive, they're like, sounds like a Schwarzenegger flick.
Yeah. I mean, it was the 80s, so.
Yeah, but
or was it
took away everything that made the story what it was and turned it into a Schwarzenegger flick. Well, and don't get me wrong, in its own respects, it's it's classic Schwarzenegger, right? But at the same time, that's not what that IP is supposed to be.
Yeah,
it had a completely different message. It was a completely different animal. Studios get the rights, and they're like, "No, we're gonna make it this."
Yeah,
and that's it's sad because now I want to see, a good depiction of this story, and then it happens to Stephen King a lot. Stanley Kubrick, one of the best filmmakers.
Oh, that pissed Stephen King off so much.
He's like, I can do The Shining better, and some people agree. I'm not one that does. I agree with Stephen King.
I agree with Stephen King wholeheartedly. The Shining was like, if it was its own movie, The Shining would be a good movie. It was not its own movie. It was based on an IP, a very, very good IP. And he's like, I'll do it this way. I can draw Kermit the Frog. I want The Shining. I'm going to do Kermit the Frog. If you get that reference. Get the reference? Family Guy? No? Go ahead.
Now I don't remember what the hell I was talking about.
The Shining.
Oh yeah, it's different. I mean that you know what it boils down to is, you know, whether it's a studio, whether it's a director, somewhere along the lines, when they for well, not lack of a better term, it's the appropriate term, when they buy the rights to somebody else's intellectual property, they do have creative license to do what they will. Jurassic Park is another great example.
Oh God,
of how they
so
just
much
change the story. I'm not saying it's better than the book. I'm not saying it's worse than the book. It's one of those weird situations where I'm like, the book, the movie, completely different things happen for the most part, but it's still equal.
And then you had Jurassic The Lost World, which was nothing like the book at all. For those of you that are not familiar, Josh and I we discussed this before.
We read books.
Yes, we do read. We read books, novels, comic books, graphic novels. You know, we are very well versed in, you know, literature. But with The Lost World, there was no San Diego. There was no San Diego in the novel. It was Dodson. He was the bad guy in the Lost World novel.
Hammond was dead.
Hammond was dead. And Hammond was a prick in the first book. He was a borderline psychopath. Didn't give a shit about his grandkids. Versus what we saw in the movie, where he was just like this loving, charming old, like, you know,
we spared no expense.
Yeah, spared no expense. But in the Lost World, Dodson was killed very graphically when he stumbled into a T-Rex nest. And it was a very graphic. If I remember right, I believe, Josh, it's been like a long time since I read The Lost World, but I'm pretty sure if remember at the end of The Lost World, I'm pretty sure he was pretty much torn to pieces by the T-Rex cubs.
Yeah,
and it's in great detail too. Great detail. And it was kind of touched upon at the end of The Lost World with the one T-Rex cub taking out Hammond's nephew. But beyond that, like, it's barely matches up to anything. But one thing that when I was talking to somebody about the show tonight, I mentioned like roughly what it was going to be about, and they're like, "Oh, well, are you going to talk about Ghostbusters?" Like, yeah, of course.
Why?
Because it's a great example of what not to do with an IP.
That's not an example
at all. In 2016, it was a great example of what. Yeah, it was, because a large part of it. Yes, but I'm talking about IP.
Like, they can do what they want.
I know, but what they wanted was not done. That's the thing. Like, it was pitched to Sony as being a continuation of the series set in a different, like, different kind of situation. That's why the initial trailers said, what do you call it? The initial trailers were like 30 years ago, 4 scientists saved the world and blah, blah, blah. Like, so it initially hinted that this was going to be a continuation of it. That's what got Sony on board with it. And I have nothing against the actresses. I have nothing against like a female Ghostbuster or anything like that. Just make it a good movie. Make it actually match up with the comedy / horror that we saw in the first 2 movies. The first 2 movies were largely like horror comedies, like almost like Akin 2, things like Shaun of the Dead. It was very much like that first Ghostbusters movie. I'll tell you right now, when I was a kid, it scared the shit out of me. Like, absolutely, 100%.
Because it was a horror movie with, funny guys.
With Bill Murray and Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. And then we had the straight everyday man, Ernie Hudson. But the one that came out in 2016.
You're just going to leave out Ernie Hudson?
No, it's like you have the 3 scientists and the one everyman. But but it's like, you have the different kinds of humor coming from all 4 of these guys. But
they were
then
reacting to scary situations.
oh,
That's what made it great.
yeah, absolutely. In the Ghostbusters 2016 movie, what I'm saying, like mishandling the IP, it doesn't just have to be studios. It can be the director mishandling something.
No,
In this
yeah, absolutely.
in this case, Paul Feige, like he absolutely absolutely mishandled everything.
He made a
He
comedy on
just
top of a comedy.
yeah, that's all it was. There was nothing spooky, scary, or anything like that. Like, like see the Ghostbusters movies, even like the Afterlife, they have one thing in common, which is the musical score. It's this eerie kind of score. You know, when something's happening, it's like this really eerie, kind of like just spooky kind of thing that you know that leaves you. It's very unsettling if you just listen to it by itself. The 2016 movie was nothing like that. But yeah, but it's like I saw James comment about like Masters of the Universe. I've got to say, like honestly, with what it's different, but you know what? I've got to say, I really enjoyed Masters of the Universe. Like I enjoyed what they did with part 1 and 2 of the first season. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was really badass. You told a He-Man movie with a He-Man story with a fraction of He-Man in the first round, and then he came back and just kicked some ass the second round, only to have us get his own ass kicked in the third round. I haven't seen the newer season yet. Really need to get on that one, but I really enjoyed everything about Masters of the Universe. I was having a great time with it from start to finish on the Netflix one. Now the movie with Dolph Lundgren was not good. It was so bad. But Frank Langella did a great job as Skeletor. I've got to say that. One hell of a villain. Josh is over here looking like he's contemplating life.
No, I haven't seen any of. I was never really a He-Man guy.
Oh God.
I was a GI Joe Mask.
Oh
Still
yeah, I'm still waiting for that Mask movie.
Yeah.
Mask or
The Exo Squad. Remember the Exo Squad?
Oh God. Remember what was it? Tiger Sharks, Thundercats, Silverhawks.
Silverhawks. God.
Make those happen, man. Make those happen. But yeah, there's a lot that happens with these IPs too that people don't really discuss. And it's even if the director is given the budget and the time to make his or her vision, we always end up with a large portion of these movies that end up with serious plot holes in them because directors have to cut out certain things to meet a time frame by the studio. So you have what do you call it? Like the Punisher. I was talking to Josh. I was talking about this this morning. The Punisher from 2003, and also Daredevil from I think that was 2003, right? 2002, 2003.
Something like that.
You watch these movies, and they just kind of like rush through the movies. You watch the director's cuts, you're like, holy shit, there's a whole lot more here. It's like easily like I think the Punisher, there's easily an extra like almost like 15 to 20 minutes. Now with Daredevil, I think there's almost like another 40 minutes of footage to make these movies like actual complete that gets rid of all the plot holes that were in the theatrical versions that we saw. But I don't know, like you see these movies and you're like, God, something's missing. You realize it's because the directors, even though they, like I said, Josh, get what they're supposed to get done finished, now they have to go back into the editing room and cut a good portion of their project out.
And sometimes they don't even have that control over their cut. And that's why sometimes we get director's cuts, but director's cuts themselves are incredibly hit and miss as we've seen over the years. We've seen director's cuts that have come out that add, I don't know, they're like 15 minutes of extra footage, and when you watch it, you're like, yeah, I get why that was cut, because it's kind of not needed for the flow of the story. Or it kind of breaks up the action. It's just not necessary. And other director's cuts, as you mentioned, you plug some holes, you sometimes wind up with a better movie. And then in other instances, you just have kind of a director, how do I put this?
Zack Snyder.
Without being I was going to say, without naming names and without being too crude, that just kind of want to, pat themselves on the butt.
No, yeah. If you ever want to see what it looks like with a guy, if you've ever been curious as to what it's like for a guy to pleasure himself orally while sniffing his own farts, watch any modern Zack Snyder movie. It's not good. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful movies.
I know they're gorgeous. They are gorgeous. And I've said this on the show before. He's got a beautiful eye for gorgeous cinematography.
Man knows how to frame a shot.
We don't need to see slow motion all the damn always. We don't need to see Lois Lane on Justice League coming out of the damn coffee shop in the rain in slow motion. We don't need to see just somebody looking at something in slow motion. Like, we don't need all this slow motion. If you cut out his slow motion, you'd have like 30 minutes shaved off the time or like the length of this movie.
Yeah, not even an exaggeration.
I'm not even joking at all. You would have 30 minutes. It is 30 minutes of slow motion in that damn Justice League movie. Like shit, dude. Like you're like it's like Michael Bay with like his like just everything has to go in circles and everything else. Like it's you get motion sick from that. You get bored watching Zack Snyder.
But you know what? Michael Bay keeps it tight.
He keeps it tight, but it's still a Michael Bay movie. He's not that great either.
I thought Ambulance was really good.
I have not seen Ambulance. But it's one of those deals though. It's just like, all right, well, like, while we're talking about IP, we can actually move over into the toy aisle of IP with GI Joe, with Transformers, with Barbie. You have you have tons of things like are based on toys. Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon was based on the action figures largely. It wasn't based on the comic book by any means. The movie in 1990 was based on the comic book. The cartoon, however, was based on the toy line. That was loosely based on the comic book. So what we got as far as the animated series, that was all based on the toys. And then they started building like the stories and like everything else and started making like it kind of did like this whole flip over. It started off with the toys, then the cartoon series. And then with the cartoon series, it went from that to the toys being based on the cartoon series as opposed to the cartoon series being based on the toys.
Well, that's just SOP for the 80s.
Yep, well, pretty much.
Let's create these toys, and then we're going to create a commercial that's 30 minutes long, aired every Saturday for these toys.
You know what cracks me up about that, though, is that, we had, you want to talk about, like, just real quick, as far as, like, toys go, we had toys in the 80s. Ladies and gentlemen, children of the current generation and youngins, late stage millennials born after like let's just say 99 2000, we had
millennials weren't born that late.
No, I said late stage millennials.
Yeah, not born in that.
I thought the last millennials were born like the cutoff. Really?
Yeah.
No. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, whatever. Is the one that came of age.
Well, and then let me rephrase this. Any of you puppies that were born around like 1999, you may not know this, but we had toys made after rated R damn movies. We had RoboCop toys.
Yeah. RoboCop toys.
We had RoboCop toys. You have any idea what it's like? Oh, Rambo. We had a Rambo cartoon. We had a RoboCop cartoon.
Had a Rambo Bowie knife.
I had one of those. Yeah, I had that, and I had the RoboCop toy that, like, you actually put like the roll of like the cap rolls in his back, and you like just like flip it, and like he just like you have like the spark shooting out of his gun. Yeah, we had toys with guns when we were kids, and they're still around now, but still, like, these were more active kind of things. But yeah. But it's just like you had this expectation, like at least when we were younger, with toys. We had Chuck Norris, we had Mr. T toys. We had
everything had a toy.
Everything had to have a toy. But then you move on from these from these toy lines, because now you have Transformers. Transformers, the toys came first. The toys came first, then the cartoon. And same like G.I. Joe. The toy line came first, and then the cartoon. And so you have like these things that build this world. He-Man, the toys came first, then the cartoon. So it's just how it worked. But they would have to build these worlds for just a handful of toys.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's exactly how it worked. These toy companies were very much um, studios as well at points, because they're they're the job of these cartoons based on the IP was, like I said, it was literally just a commercial to tell the story of the toys.
yep,
That's what they were. That's the whole purpose, to sell the toys.
yeah. But see, now you have things where it's just like they would have the writers look at these toys, and this is going to I guess move into a talking point I want to make here. But you had the writers for these TV shows, right? For these cartoons, they were given these toys. Like with Ninja Turtles, the writers were given like the action figures, the first line that came out, and they had to read the boxes and everything else. They had to get together. They had to write out like these characters and how they were going to be portrayed in this. But they had to know something about the IP. They also had to read the comic books by Peter Laird. And like they had to go back and read these things. Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird. They had to read their lines of comic books. So they also had to know what not to do. So they do the cartoons. Then the 1990 movie comes out. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie comes out, which lines up very closely to the comic book. Some things are just straight out of the pages of the comic book. And then a few years later, we get Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, which is much more, I'm just going to say dumbed down for kids. It's much less emotional than the first one was. The first one was a dark movie, man. It was a very, very dark, fucked up movie. There's my one per episode.
I say it holds up.
I do too. It still stands as the best Ninja Turtles movie we've ever gotten in my mind. Oh, I like just it's amazing.
Not only does it hold up, I think, as far as story goes, nothing has been able to match the puppetry of those movies since.
No, absolutely. Because even in part two, and parents are so mad about how dark and gruesome the first movie was. And I don't like gruesome. I don't mean gory. I just mean like Raphael getting his ass kicked on the roof, thrown through a window near death, to where everyone's
Raphael
freaking out
saying
about
the
him.
D word.
Oh yeah. Damn. Like, oh my god.
Twice.
But yeah. But not just that, but like them thinking that Splinter was killed. That fight with Shredder. First of all, they should be very thankful that Shredder even showed up. Like, I mean, like they're kicking the foot soldiers' asses. Like, they're, like the whole scene. Like, I didn't get it as a kid. I did not get this as a kid. But with April O'Neil, when they're driving away from her building being burnt down, that's not just her apartment. That is also the antique store that she kept open because her dad died. And it's a way that she was open about losing money because she wanted to keep the store open. So her watching that building burn down and then going to the family's farmhouse and everything else, where a good portion of the movie took place.
Wasn't she fired at the same time?
Yeah. She was fired. She didn't know that she was fired. Casey Jones was listening to her boss Chuck firing her.
By the way, answering machines.
Yeah, answering machines.
Kids. when you weren't home to take a phone call because there were no cell phones, they had these little boxes that would sort of answer the phone for you. Then, well, it was voicemail, except it was in a box that you sat by the phone.
Well, you listen, and you've seen a little bit of what an answer machine is if you've ever watched Better Call Saul. But the thing is, like, so this movie goes on. It's such a dark movie. The only thing that didn't really make sense to me is at the very end when Shredder is a master of ninjutsu and he's beating the shit out of these 4 turtles, almost kills Leonardo if Splinter did not just show up. And his reaction to seeing Splinter and finding out that this is the rat that left his face scarred, his reaction as a ninja master is to charge towards him with a spear towards the edge of a building not throw the spear, nothing like that. I'm going to run as fast as I can with this spear towards this rat, and then he just gets hurled right over the rat's head, like because the rat grabs a pair of nunchucks, which in the second movie, no one used their weapons at all. No one used their weapons in the second movie. Not once. Not like as far as offensively or anything like that. Like, it's just like we got to see Mikey using like, cold cuts as like nunchucks in the beginning. Never uses nunchucks again. Never uses nunchucks once the entire movie. Raphael used his side daggers to catch a piece of pizza. That's all he used them for.
That's because they had to go by cartoon rules.
I know, but that goes into like the whole IP thing that I was going to like transfer over into with that, is the fact that with the IP for that, they wanted to match more closely to the cartoon than they did for the comic book.
All right. I get it. I got to stop you right there, because we can't talk about these movies without. There are two lines from these movies that I absolutely adore. Do you know what they are?
Go for it. Pizza Dude's got 30 seconds.
That leads into wise man saying,
Oh, yeah.
forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza. That's one.
Okay.
And you're talking about Michelangelo with the nunchucks.
Oh yeah, combat cold cuts. Next time I use mustard.
A fellow chucker. Eh?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's still like, I still love after he does that. You have like the foot soldier with the nunchucks. Like, oh.
That's just my favorite. They just have this like,
oh man,
exhibition like right in the middle of a big fight,
and everyone's just watching these two face off. No one's even fighting at this point. They're just like watching these two have a.
I love it. I love it. It's the best.
But
I wish more movies would just like break the action and see something weird like this happen, to where everybody's like, "What the hell's going on over there?"
But there's one more thing that like maybe people didn't notice. If you're not really a big film buff, or like if you're not really familiar with how choreography works, most choreography, most fights are done in like a closer shot. A closer shot, and then like as someone gets hit or something like that, they'll change the camera angles because of how the choreography is done.
Yeah,
the Ninja Turtles movie did not do that. They had these martial artists in these suits, along with all these like in these martial artists in these these foot soldier costumes. These are legit, like these are like longer fights with these guys, and they're so perfectly choreographed. And they have to be, because you have like these actors, like you have these actors in this like, like this very like visually constrictive like mask, and you have to get this choreography right. And these guys, I was watching Mortal Kombat. I watched Ninja Turtles and then I watched Mortal Kombat, and I noticed it where the fighting is so incredibly cut up in Mortal Kombat. There's a scene of Liu Kang running up a wall and like kicking out the wall, turning around and kicking some like warrior in the face. And they could just show that follow through, but they cut it to just a foot hitting this guy in the face. These movies were like masterfully made. But I'm coming so far off my original point. My point was, yeah, we both love the Ninja Turtles movies, in case you guys can't figure that out. My point was that these guys had to go off of a property, whether it is on the original one from 1990 or Ninja Turtles 2 from, I think, 1992, when that one came out. Or 93, one of the two. But when they went off of Ninja Turtles 2, that still had to match an IP. In this case, the cartoon, not the comic book. You have something going on right now where a lot of writers are coming forward talking about how they're being told to ignore the intellectual property, the source material. And Disney, I'm looking at you when I say this, where these people are being told to ignore source material to tell stories. The writers for Multiverse of Madness had never seen WandaVision. They were told WandaVision had nothing to do with this movie. On top of that, WandaVision had very little to do with the source material for Wanda Maximoff. A lot of what happened with her had very little to do with the source material, although we do find out that she's different. but she is a mutant in the comic books, and we find out that she's kind of, I guess, was it established that she is a mutant?
No, but that doesn't count
Why does that not count?
because they own the property.
Okay, but they own the property, but like the actual initial original, like, like how is like the source material? Because
It's irrelevant.
Still counts to me.
No,
Because they picked. God,
for them, it's just retconning into a new universe.
Yeah, it's still
horrible.
horrible.
Like Kamala Khan being a mutant. This is how they want to tell the story going forward. It's their choice. They're not disrespecting anything because they own it.
I will say what Disney has done with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny versus what was put out when Lucasfilm was the sole owner of Indiana Jones back with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Improvement, I'll say that one.
Absolutely.
Massive improvement. Because I think, you and I talked about that one, like how like the first 20 minutes of that movie was like watching an old school, and it was like just watching a classic Indiana Jones movie all over again. It felt great. Looked amazing too. But okay, then we will go the route. Let's go ahead and like while we're talking to Disney, we'll talk about Disney with things like like their fairy tales compared to what came out. People have gotten up in arms. I've heard the whole woke argument over like Disney doing like their Little Mermaid thing and all that stuff, and I'm thinking like just they didn't really even change much with that aside from her skin color, and they took out Le Poisson, which really pissed me off. It still does.
Well, we can also say that wasn't the original IP.
That was not the original IP. The original IP is one where she turns into sea foam at the end. But it's just like people know Little Mermaid as a Disney thing, much like Lion King is a Disney property. Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. You hear these things, you instantly think of Disney. You don't think of like the Brothers Grimm, like the Brother Grimm books and all that stuff. You don't think about any of that stuff. You just think about like just Disney because it's so Disney-fied as it is right now.
But what people should really focus on is, people complaining about these fairy tale movies and they're remaking them, blah 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 blah. It's a tired argument. Here's what you can do about that. Make your own.
Yeah, it's public domain.
Public domain. Nobody, like literally nobody can stop you.
Yeah, look at Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. There's a sequel coming out. And Tigger looks like a badass. I gotta say it. Tigger looks pretty awesome. But it's not.
Now,
first of all, it's not a good movie.
Willie is getting the public domain treatment. You're complaining about the Little Mermaid, and not one of you is stepping up to the plate and saying, "I'm going to do it better."
Yeah, you poor unfortunate souls. So sad.
I see what you did there.
So true.
And I just found out that next year, the year after, so soon, within the next few years, Dick Tracy is going to be, in the public domain.
2025 or 2027, something like that. But like, I was reading. I think I
think I read that same article.
Yeah, it was something that a friend of ours, a friend of the show, he's in this movie group that we're in. Our friend Jermaine, he posted something about Dick Tracy and how for years,
that's great.
Like, oh God,
here I'll explain.
What is his name?
Over the years, Warren Beatty has been making sequel after sequel,
really bad, very short but very bad,
just to be able to keep the rights to Dick Tracy
as a giant screw you.
It goes to the public domain in a few years. That's going to stop. Hopefully, he'll do one more. It's kind of a going away present, but yeah. He just does that as a middle finger. That's all it is. Because they didn't want him to come back as Dick Tracy for another movie. Oh, no me? Well, no Dick Tracy.
Oh my God. It's just, I mean, yeah, it's hysterical, but yeah, like I mean, it's a brilliant move. But yeah, no, people don't understand. Like Disney is not the creator of these characters. They don't really hold any IP in Snow White, in Alice in Wonderland, or in any of this stuff. I think Mary Poppins, kind of. Um, but they screwed the pooch with the first Mary Poppins movie because it did not match the source material that they did not hold the intellectual property over. Um, there's a reason why the sequel to Mary Poppins didn't come out for half a century later.
It's
But
so they could
it's
get Lin-Manuel Miranda to be in the movie.
yeah,
That's the only reason it
yeah,
took so long.
yeah. They were waiting for him to be born.
I've been waiting for him to be born, even though he's older than
Oh
me.
my god. No, but so you have like these you have these other movies, like you have all these fairy tales that Disney's put out that they don't own the IP for. The Lion King, they don't own anything for the Lion King. That is a ripoff of another legend called Kimba. Not like where like
Macbeth. Wait, what?
yeah, um, it could you could be said for that too. Absolutely, 100%. But then you have other things that I think like kind of tweak the IP just a little bit, like the 1990s Shakespeare. I'm sorry, 1990s Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes.
Baz Luhrmann.
So it's like they took that, they modernized it and everything else while keeping the classic Shakespearean text as like the
Yeah.
script. But everything's modernized. Like they don't have daggers; they have guns that have the word dagger like engraved on it.
Sword.
So yeah, sword.
Do you bite your tongue at me?
No, they used to. But I do bite my tongue.
At thee, sir.
Hearing Jamie Kennedy recite Shakespeare, man.
That's a movie that
And
proved
he's-
that John Leguizamo was amazing.
Oh yeah. The thing is, like, you have these comedians, like, Jamie Kennedy, like he is hysterical, but he's also a brilliant dude. He's a very intelligent guy. He really is. But like that's an example of something that like where you take something like an IP and you give it your own twist, and what you make is an instant classic. Because I remember like someone was watching the movie and like, oh yeah, you should read the novel. Like, oh, like the actual like the play. The play is like intense. Like there's not everything in this movie
Play stupid.
was not everything in this movie could have made it in here. But the person I was saying this to was like, oh, there's a book about this. Like, you could say that. It is a play that is a couple hundred years old. Yes, it existed before this movie came out.
I think another clever twisting of IP. Like if somebody said, because I'll be honest, as much of a theater geek as I am, love musicals and blah blah blah. I'm not prone to read the prose of Shakespeare. It's not really my thing. But so if somebody said you should partake in enjoying Taming of the Shrew, and I'm like, no, I'm good. But when somebody says you should watch 10 Things I Hate About You, I'm like, yeah, I'll watch that 8 times.
Yeah, that's another great example of a movie based on Shakespeare, or even like with who's I think Josh Hartnett. Not a great movie, but that was based on Othello. So you have some great things, but then you also have movies that are based like is it oh god, there was a movie that was based loosely on Frankenstein, but it was like not undead. But then you also have really
Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein. Actually, yeah, that's that's Young Frankenstein. No, there's one that was based on Frankenstein that was, I guess, meant to be a clever thing, but it wasn't. It just sucked, and it's so forgettable.
Weird Science?
No, not Weird Science. Oh, that's right. Frankenhooker.
Oh God.
I'm sorry, that's the name of it. Like, not a good movie. Like, it really did not hit the spot.
Like, hold on. What was the name of that movie? What was it?
Oh, you thought it was gonna be something.
Frankenhooker.
You thought it was gonna be something profound, huh?
I thought it was going to be something anybody had ever heard of.
No, I've heard of it. But I believe it was like a trauma production.
Oh yeah, you think?
And there was a Romeo and Juliet Tromaville production too. I just can't remember that. Like it was really not good. But then you have other things that have come out that respects the source material. I would not say Dracula. I would not say Bram Stoker's Dracula is one of them. Dude. Everything in that movie was good except for Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder. They were both horrible.
It was the 90s.
Keanu Reeves looks so confused. I'm happy that he can make fun of himself now about that.
Yeah,
because he has given himself a lot of shit over that movie. His acting next to Gary Oldman and everything else. Like you're next to Gary Oldman. There's never Gary Oldman in anything he's in. But you're over here as just Keanu Reeves. Like we're all waiting for you to say "whoa" at some point.
Whoa.
Well, yeah. Basically, wrap up my points with everything because we were getting to be about that time. Really, like IP and everything else, I feel like there's a lot of studios that really just do not seem to appreciate the creative aspect of things. You have these old, worn-out people that should have retired 25,000 years ago that are still trying to show how creative they are by doing the same shit as everybody else, which results in a complete shit show of production that most times is completely unwatchable. You have Madam Web that is based on a blind paraplegic woman that can reach across different universes, and this one she's just really more of a clairvoyance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an origin story for a character that's really not that important to anything that's being built right now. It's really irrelevant to everything that's happening. But you have the things that you have like Venom, where they're telling that story without Spider-Man, which is the reason why he becomes Venom. His name was not Venom in the comic books. He just becomes Venom because he considered himself Venom to Spider-Man. It's like you're leaving out this entire universe of characters. But and now they're kind of doing that with things like the Joker, which I'm one of the few that thinks that the Joker was okay at best. It had some great parts to it, but it wasn't like that good of a movie. It was just Taxi Driver with a clown and comedy to me. Yeah.
Well, I think to kind of wrap things up, we'll go to the question that I kind of posed to you earlier on the phone.
Okay, what's that?
Which is when it comes to these adaptations of somebody's work, somebody's baby, somebody's story.
Okay.
There are sort of just for the sake of argument, we'll say 3 dynamic forces in play when it comes to translation from original IP to the screen. There's of course the will of the creator and what they want to see translated to the screen. Then there's the studio and what they want to do to translate to the screen. And then there's the director, who is kind of like the final stop on what gets shot. Okay. Whether he's under orders to do it a certain way or not, he's the one, or they are the one that kind of ultimately has the ability to capture the footage, right?
Okay.
So when it comes to adaptations of property, we have to ask who's the most important, whose opinion matters the most, whose opinion should matter the most when it comes to adapting someone else's intellectual property?
Well, it depends on who the director is. If it's Zack Snyder, definitely anyone else. If it's Paul Feig, anyone else. Yeah.
I mean, should the original creator always like at least have a hand in what's being made? Or
I think
I mean,
to a small degree, but not so much.
Look at Forrest Gump, as a good example. They completely changed the story, and it was done in such a way that the author completely disowned sort of the film version of the story, especially when it comes to the sequel. Yes, there was a sequel to Forrest Gump in book form.
I was going to say a follow-up novel, not a movie sequel.
Called Gump and Company, where one of the first things Forrest says is, don't ever let people make a movie about your life.
Yeah,
and for those wondering what the differences are, look it up, because the time's running out. Not really a whole lot of time to get into, the big differences between, and I think we've talked about it here on the show before. But the fact of the matter is, the original author hated what they did with his story. Stephen King didn't like what Kubrick did with the story. There's sometimes the author seems to be, or the creator of the original content seems to be sort of iced out of the process altogether, and the studio takes it, does what they want to do with it, or the director takes it and does what he wants to do with it, and that's that, with no due respect given to the actual creator of the property. And is this right?
Well, it really
or
depends.
Should the studio, they're like,
Josh,
we paid for it, right?
Josh, this would have been a great question to open the show with.
Well, I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
You could have.
I'm not going to interrupt.
But anyway, it is that time.
I don't like to interrupt people.
Okay, well, it is that time.
It's just not what I do.
It's what you're doing right now. So it's that time. Let's go ahead and end this.
I think you're mistaken.
It's 8:00. I got to go. Follow me, bjacksman1982 on Instagram. Also, more importantly, follow the WADcast on Instagram, on Threads, and on Facebook. So just type in facebook.com/the WADcast, or just type in the WADcast in the Facebook search bar. You'll find us.
Mm-hmm.
The little logo is up here at the top of the corner of the screen. You'll have my mug, his mug, both there to, just entice you into liking our shit. So go follow us. And that's really it. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. I will be pulling in at least 36 hours in the next 2.5 days. So I am going to let you guys go so I can get at least a quick little power nap in before I go to work tonight. But you guys all have an amazing week. I'm going to leave you here with Josh with his Danny Tanner words of wisdom. Josh, you're gorgeous as always. Look at those lips. Who wouldn't want to kiss those lips, guys? But you do your thing, and have a great weekend, buddy.
You too, man. All right, kids. It's just us. You know what that means? It's time for a late night WADcast. Yeah, it's part of the show where I tell you. Always, you can go to whatcommunity.com to find out all those links and stuff. Cool stuff, merch available, blah, 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 blah. Oh, forgot to mention this. We're going to have exclusive WADcast subscription. So if you feel like doing that at some point, we'll start promoting that. See what happens. It's a new feature of our podcast distributor, and as soon as we figure out something like how it works, we'll let you know and see if we can get some sort of cool, super awesome WADcast club thing going. That's the news. So, with all of that being said, hey, it's time to remind you that the only thing stopping you, or the only, how do I do this? The only thing getting in the way between, sorry, long day. Okay, right, I remember now. The only thing standing between you and your dreams is you. That's not a finger of blame. That's just pointing you in the direction of the way you need to go to do the thing you want to do. Because you don't need to ask permission to be a creator. If you want to write, start writing. If you want to take pictures, take pictures. If you want to direct, yada yada yada. All you got to do is start doing it. And case in point, I am not a painter, as you can tell. But I painted a picture. And for some reason, it's blurring out the picture. But I painted a picture with paint on canvas. Why? Because why not? I wanted to create something, so I did. I wasn't going to let a little thing like not having talent stop me. That's how you get talent. By doing something over and over again. So remember that. Don't ask for permission to create your art. Just start creating your art. And then next thing you know, maybe you'll be pretty good at it. Next thing you know, maybe you'll start making money at it. Next thing you know, you're happier. And when someone's happier, that happiness tends to spread like an infection because you're treating people better. And then they're treating people better. And next thing you know, the world's a better place for everybody. So get on it. Stop waiting. Tomorrow's not guaranteed, people. All right. So this has been the WADcast, episode number 161. We will be back next week, or at least I will. We'll have an announcement on that soon. Back next week with episode number 162. Until then, I hope everybody kind of sits back, relaxes, and if you have a 3-day weekend, enjoy it, because they don't come around very often anymore. Well, time to say goodnight. So have a good night, everybody. Have a good week. And we will see you